The arrival the stars were quiet as the ship named Vera entered the orbit of a blue planet. The crew inside the ship came from a peaceful race that had explored hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. They believed in knowledge, not war. They collected samples, studied life forms, and respected the rules of nature. They had studied gas giants, icy moons, and even planets where storms never stopped. But Earth was different. For many years, Earth had been marked in their records as unstable and dangerous. It was called a deathworld by old explorers who passed by its system. Those explorers had never landed. They only sent weak probes which stopped working too fast. Most believed the planet was too wild. The weather was too violent, the animals too strange, and the air too thick. Some said the planet itself fought back against anything not born from it. Commander Ravs stood in the control room of the Vera. He was tall, strong, and covered in silver skin that shimmered under the lights. His eyes stared down at the planet below. He had studied the reports. Earth had oxygen, carbon, life forms, and water. Everything needed to support life. But it was also home to storms that tore trees apart, mountains that spat fire, and oceans that pulled ships under without warning. Ravs was not afraid. He believed truth lived in the unknown. That is why he and his crew had come. They did not wish to harm the planet. They only wished to understand it. They planned to land, use protective suits, release drones, and collect samples. Their goal was simple: study the most dangerous creatures on Earth and learn how they lived. Learn what made them strong. Learn what made Earth deadly. The ship hovered above the planet for many hours. From the windows, the crew watched clouds form and fade. They saw flashes of light across landmasses and the movement of water along dark coastlines. The ship scanned areas with high biodiversity. The jungle regions showed strange shapes moving through thick green layers. The deserts shimmered with heat and dust. The oceans swirled with shadows deeper than any place they had seen before. Ravs chose 3 landing sites. One in a dense green forest, one in a dry open plain, and one near a coastal zone. The science team was ready. Suits were checked, drones were loaded, tools and sensors were locked. They moved calmly and quickly. This was not their first mission, but even the bravest among them felt something unusual in their minds. This planet felt alive in a way other worlds did not. It did not just exist. It watched. The first team dropped into the forest. Trees rose high like towers. Vines twisted around thick trunks. Strange sounds filled the air. Buzzing, clicking, hissing calls none of them understood. The ground was wet, soft, and filled with small creatures. The air felt thick and hot. Drones flew out and began scanning. Within minutes, one drone flew too close to a flying insect and was hit. It crashed with smoke. The insect moved on as if nothing had happened. The second team landed on the plains. The sky was open, the wind strong and dry. Large animals moved in the distance, some with horns, some with long necks. A group of smaller creatures ran across the dry grass and vanished into holes in the earth. The scientists recorded heat levels, soil samples, and wind data. They tried to scan a nearby creature, but it ran too fast. It moved with power and speed that surprised even the drones. The third team reached the coastal zone. Waves crashed against rocks. Birds circled above. In the water, large shapes moved slowly. The team sent a diving drone into the ocean. It dropped into the deep blue, but within minutes the signal ended. Something had pulled the drone down. The crew tried to recover the feed, but it was gone. One member suggested they send another. Ravs said no. The loss was a warning. The ocean kept its secrets back on the ship. The data was collected. Each team sent samples, photos, and video feeds. They saw insects with colors that signaled poison, mammals with claws, teeth, and speed beyond their size. They saw reptiles that did not move until the last second, then struck with force. Even the smallest creatures could kill. Some with venom, some with sharp parts, some with nothing but disease. The scientists began to see a pattern. Life on Earth did not just grow, it fought. Everything fought. Commander Ravs sat in his chamber, watching a slow-motion video of a frog leaping and catching a fly. He rewound the moment again and again. The timing, the control, the hunger behind the movement. Earth's creatures did not wait. They acted. Every breath was survival. Every day was battle. Even in rest there was risk. A young researcher entered and showed Ravs a new file. It was about a spider the size of a hand that built traps underground. It waited for days, then burst upward to catch its prey in less than a blink. The spider had no eyes, only hairs that felt movement. It lived in silence, then exploded into violence. Ravs looked at the image and said one word. Adaptation. The word became the theme of their notes. Adaptation. Earth species adapted to kill or avoid being killed. They did not just live, they changed fast and hard. They became faster, tougher, smarter. The planet pushed them, and they pushed back. The result was a balance where every life form played a role in death and survival. Night came, and the teams returned to the ship. Their suits showed wear. One had deep scratches. Another had burn marks. A third had dried fluid from a plant that had sprayed when touched. None of them were hurt, but all of them looked shaken. They spoke little. They only uploaded files and checked the next plans. Ravs watched them and said nothing. He knew what they were feeling: awe, respect, and the early rise of fear. This was only the beginning. Tomorrow they would go deeper. They had not yet seen the true face of Earth's danger. They had only touched the edge. He looked once more at the planet turning below and thought a single quiet thought. What kind of species survives this place and calls it home? The first encounter. Morning returned to the sky above Earth. The ship, Vera, floated silently as the crew prepared for deeper fieldwork. The first day had opened their eyes. They had expected danger, but not this kind of silent, hidden power. The planet did not shout its threats. It whispered them. And the ones who ignored the whisper faced the cost. Commander Ravs gave the order to begin Phase 2. This part of the mission would not focus on scanning or surface data. It would focus on living contact. They would observe the most dangerous creatures up close. Study their movement, their behavior, their methods. Understand how they hunted, how they defended, and how they survived in this violent world. The teams knew the risks. Still they moved forward. 3 teams again prepared for launch. They had changed their suits, upgraded their drones, and added reinforced scanners. Warnings had been placed on every tool. No touch without scan. No contact without distance. The forest team returned to the green depths. The plains team moved toward a region with large predators. The coast team planned to reach a wetland known for silent deaths. The forest was darker today. Clouds blocked the sun. The air was heavier. The team moved slowly through thick vines and wet ground. One member stopped when he saw something moving near his boot. It was a small creature with black skin and bright yellow lines. The scanner gave a sharp signal: highly toxic. One touch could cause a heart to stop. The team backed away. The creature did not chase. It only waited. As if it knew time always brought its prey close, they placed a drone near a clearing and activated long-range cameras. Hours passed as they watched. A group of insects moved like an army across a tree. They cut leaves, chewed bark, and vanished inside tunnels. Each one followed the other with perfect timing. When one fell into a puddle, the others kept moving. No pause, no break, no rescue. Nature did not slow down for the weak. Suddenly a large shape moved across the feed. It was a mammal with dark fur and long claws. It looked slow, but the sensors picked up speed that did not match its size. It smelled the air, watched the insects, and moved on. The drone followed it for 20 minutes. Then it stopped. It stood still for a long time. Then it turned and looked directly at the drone. There was no sound, no growl, no move to strike. Just the look. The drone lost signal seconds later in the open plains. The second team had reached a region where fast creatures ruled. Tall grass moved with the wind. The team walked with caution, watching the ground as much as the sky. A drone picked up heat. Shapes beyond the horizon, herd animals. But something followed them. Something low to the ground, fast and nearly silent. It struck at nightfall. The team watched through thermal cams as a single predator moved through the grass with grace. It chose the smallest of the herd and moved with full control. No sound, no flash, no mistake. When it leaped, it aimed true. The kill was over in seconds. The rest of the herd ran. The predator dragged its prize under a tree and vanished. The team was quiet after that. One member whispered that this world hunted without hate. It killed because it must. There was no cruelty in it. Only law, the law of hunger. The law of silence. The law of speed. They placed sensors across the field to track motion. In 1 hour, the sensors recorded 10 new patterns. Some creatures avoided the sensors. Some did not care. One walked over a sensor and crushed it without stopping. The field had rules, but they did not belong to machines. They belonged to instinct. The wetland team moved through still waters and thick air. Insects swarmed near their visors. They moved slowly across paths where water met land. One drone flew over a patch of mud and was swallowed. Not sunk, but taken. Something had pulled it under. No teeth, no eyes were seen. Only bubbles rose where the drone had been. The team used a deep sound scanner to map the mud below. The shape was large, slow, and patient. It waited near the edge of the trail where small animals would pass. It did not chase. It let the world come to it. And when the time was right, it moved faster than sight. It was not the fastest or the strongest, but it was a master of time. They recorded frogs that could launch their tongues with perfect aim. Snakes that moved without sound across branches. Birds with sharp sight that could spot prey from high above. Every creature had a gift, a skill, a weapon. Back on the ship, the data came in like waves. Rovak sat with his lead analysts and studied the files. There was no doubt left. This world was not dangerous because of one beast. It was dangerous because danger lived in all sizes and all shapes. A small bug could kill a large animal. A plant could trap an insect. A snake could strike a bird. A bird could carry a snake. The cycle never stopped. One of the team leaders said something simple. This world does not forgive weakness. Another added, even the air carries things that can hurt. The planet did not welcome life. It challenged it. And those that lived here did not survive by luck. They survived by change. They watched a clip from the forest. A camera left near a clearing had recorded a fight between two creatures. One was small, fast, and used the trees. The other was larger with strong legs. The fight lasted seconds. Sharp movement, claws, flash blood. Then silence. The smaller creature won not by force, but by speed and angle. It knew the land better. It had fought before. It had learned. Rovak leaned back and closed his eyes. He felt something new. Not fear, not respect. It was a deep understanding. This planet was not like the others. It did not share life. It tested. Ith opened his eyes and gave the next order. Begin study of top predators. Large ones, small ones, even hidden ones. Find what rules this land. Find what hunts everything else. He did not yet ask about humans. That time would come. But he knew something now. If creatures like these filled the forest's waters and plains, then the ones who built cities and fire and machines be something else entirely. The realization inside the ship Vera, the silence grew heavier with each report. That reached the central room. Screens showed creatures that did not just live but thrived by mastering speed, strength, poison, or stealth. Each team had returned with stories that no longer sounded like science. They sounded like survival tales whispered by those who came too. Close and barely made it back. The wounds on one research suit had not come from a beast, but from a plant that launched sharp seeds into anything that brushed against it. Another suit carried traces of skin burned not from fire, but from contact with a jelly-like organism found near river stones. The patterns were clear. Earth did not rely on size for danger. It relied on variety. Each living thing was a weapon crafted. By time one of the engineers was reviewing air samples when he found something strange. Microbes within the air moved faster than expected. Some had spikes, some had shields. They reacted quickly to temperature changes and chemical presence. One even adapted its shape when exposed to heat. The engineer froze. He whispered one sentence. To himself. Even the smallest life on this planet prepares for War Commander. Rovak was watching a live feed from the field team that had entered a mountain cave in search of deep ecosystem samples. The cave was wet dark and lined with glowing fungus. The team had barely begun scanning when they noticed something in the water pools. Small fish with no eyes but sharp movement. They could detect pressure and motion. One of them leaped from the pool and bit the sensor head. The feed cut off before anyone could react. The cave team returned with samples, but no full recordings. They looked pale and quiet. One researcher placed a sealed box on the table. Inside was a creature that looked like a worm but pulsed with light, and had tiny hooks along its skin. It was slow, but when tested against vibration, it twisted with surprising force. When removed from water, it survived longer than expected. The biologist in charge said one line that reached every ear in the room. This thing was not made to survive. It was made to wait. Each room in the ship now carried signs of Earth's hidden power. Containers with insects that mimicked leaves but struck like blades. Tanks with fish that used electricity not only to navigate but to attack. Digital maps of forests that reshaped themselves each week as new growth erased old paths. A drone placed near a marsh had been lost not to a creature, but to a gas that corroded its shell from the inside. The science team gathered in the main hall. Charts filled the walls. Motion patterns, blood analysis, venom reactions, plant behavior. Infection cycles. It was no longer just biology. It had become a study of warfare. Nature's Warfare 1 scientists stepped forward and showed a timeline of adaptation in a single species of rodent. Within just a few generations, its fur had darkened. Its teeth had sharpened and its speed had increased. All because a new predator had entered the region. The change had not taken millions of years, it had taken months. The speed of evolution on Earth was unlike any planet they had seen. Rovak stood and asked one question. What keeps balance in this world? There was silence before a response came. Nothing keeps balance. Everything fights for it. They reviewed footage from across all locations. In the plains, one predator was chased off by a group of smaller creatures working together. In the ocean, a large shape avoided another because of electric signals. In the forest, one plant released smoke to drive away insects. Earth did not have peace. It had checks. When one form grew strong, another rose to challenge it. Then came the moment that changed everything. A drone flying above a forest hill recorded movement that did not match any known pattern. Not beast, not weather, not machine. The figure moved. Upright, it carried fire on a stick and wore crafted skin. It walked with direction, not instinct. It stopped near a stream and drank water from a metal cup. The crew stared. They had seen their first human. The drone stayed hidden and followed the figure for minutes. The human sat near the water, lit a fire, placed something to cook, and remained still. Its eyes scanned the woods as if aware of everything. When a sound came from the brush, it turned without fear. Its hand reached for a tool. Not just any tool. A weapon. The figure did not use it. The threat passed. But the message was clear. This was a species that understood danger. Not only that, it prepared for it, controlled it. Faced it, Rovak called for a full shift in focus. They would now study not just the creatures but the species that ruled them. The humans, they reviewed data from satellites. Cities, machines, transport zones, heat signatures from homes. They found signs of fire across cold regions, water flow control in deserts, shelters deep, underground floating ships that crossed entire oceans. In one desert they saw humans walking calmly under heat that would kill most life. In a frozen region, others hunted with tools and moved on foot over ice. The question rose again. How did this species survive so many dangers? The answer came slowly as the files grew. They built, they planned, they taught. They turned weakness into strength by creating solutions. They used tools to replace claws, brains to replace instinct, and courage to replace fear. One analyst said what many feared to admit. These are not the strongest beings on Earth, but they are the most dangerous because they learn. They do not wait to evolve. They adapt with thought, the council agreed. Earth's greatest threat was not a beast or a storm or a poison. It was a species that rose in a world of death and learned not just how to live, but how to master every other form of life or rock. Closed the files and looked at the world below. Now he understood why this planet had so few visitors. It did not need defenders. It already had one, and it walked on two legs. Humanity's revealed night drifted over the ship. Vera, while screens continued to show human activity across the planet. The alien crew watched with careful eyes as more files came in. The calm walks, the sudden action, the quiet thinking, the strong reaction. Every human moved with a purpose that felt different from animals. They were not guided by smell or hunger. They were guided by awareness and something more powerful than instinct. Commander Rovak stood near the main screen where a new video had started to play. It showed a wide forest clearing where a human was moving slowly. In one hand the human carried a long tool, in the other a small black box. He bent down, touched leaves, studied broken branches, and followed tracks in the mud. The alien observers thought the human was lost or searching for food. Then the camera zoomed closer and showed the truth. The human was tracking. A few steps later, the human stopped behind a tree and looked across the clearing. Another large creature stood near a fallen tree. It was powerful with long fur and sharp claws. The human made no sound but raised his tool and waited. The animal moved closer, sniffed the air, and paused. The wind shifted. The creature looked straight toward the human and roared. The human did not run. He threw a stone near the animal to shift its path. The animal turned its head for a second. That was enough. The human stepped out, shouted, and raised a bright flare. The light burst and the animal stopped. It did not attack. It backed away and then ran into the trees. The human stood still, breathing hard, watching the dark for a while. Then he turned around and walked back toward the trail. The aliens were silent. They had just witnessed a human face one of Earth's top predators without using speed or strength. He had used mind and calm. He had changed the outcome of the hunt without blood. This was not survival by accident. This was survival by decision. In the control room, files began stacking with examples of humans doing the impossible. One man climbed a frozen peak with only rope and simple tools. Another crossed a desert with limited water but used stars for direction and shade for rest. A group survived underwater by creating systems for air and light. On an island, people lived through storms by building strong homes with low centers and deep roots. These were not single acts. These were patterns. The team studied the tools. Fire starters, traps, medicines from plants, maps of stars, and machines that used energy from the wind. Humans had taken their dangerous world and turned it into a field of learning. Everything that could harm them became a reason to grow. A snake bite became a cure. A storm became a power source. A mountain became a place to test limits. They did not just adapt to the world. They changed it to fit their will. The wetland team showed a file of a young girl walking through tall grass with a bird on her shoulder. The bird was wild but calm. She whistled and it flew up, then returned. Nearby was a dog moving ahead and clearing the path. The girl stopped at a stream where she threw seeds into the water. Fish rose and took the seeds. She laughed and watched. The ripples, the teen noticed something strange. The wild creatures were not running from her. They were near her. They responded to her voice and her steps. It was a connection built not by power, but by trust. The aliens did not know how this could happen. No other species on Earth had done this. It was as if humans had made peace with danger and turned it into company. One drone followed a human settlement near a jungle. Here people lived close to wild zones where creatures often crossed paths with them. The aliens expected signs of fear or barriers but saw something else. People had built high fences only in food zones. Outside those fences they placed simple sound tools to warn both animals and humans. The message was clear. Stay in your path and we will stay in ours. Rovak walked through the lab section where samples were being tested. A scientist held a broken piece of human clothing with patterns that changed with light. It was made to hide from sight, not with heavy tech, but with natural colors. Another scientist showed a piece of rope made from dry plant skin, strong enough to pull weight, light enough to carry long distances. Human tools were made from the world around them, and they worked. One file showed humans in a deep forest at night. They moved in groups with quiet steps. One person held a device that gave soft sound to guide the group. Another watched heat signs with a hand tool. In one moment they paused. Ahead was a large animal moving slowly. The group stayed low and waited. No attack, no noise, no movement. They respected the rule of distance. When the animal passed, they continued. The aliens saw this again and again. In mountains and water, in dark caves. Humans could face danger, but they could also avoid it with wisdom. They were not controlled by fear, but guided by logic. They chose when to fight and when to wait. That choice gave them power. A group of young aliens sat in the corner room watching a human documentary file. In it, a man explained how he had learned to swim by watching fish, how he built shelter by watching birds, how he made traps by watching spiders. He said the world had taught him more than books. The aliens looked at each other and understood. This was a species that did not just survive by knowledge. It survived by learning from what tried to kill it. Rovak stood before the window and stared at Earth below. He had visited many planets, seen many life forms, watched many struggles. But never had he seen a place like this. And never had he seen beings like these. Creatures that had no claws but built tools. No wings but flew across skies. No gills but crossed deep oceans. This was not just a strong species. This was a species that grew stronger by being surrounded by death. A species that found challenge in everything and turned it into skill. They had met Earth's deadliest creatures in the form of beasts and plants. But now they knew the truth. The most dangerous creature on Earth was the one that built fire and walked upright and looked up at the stars. The exit and the warning. The ship Vera floated above the blue planet in stillness, as though the crew had forgotten how to speak. The control panels blinked softly, but no one looked at them. All eyes were locked on the final reports that had been gathered across land, sea, and sky. The room was quiet, not with peace, but with deep thought. A feeling that could not be explained had taken hold of every crew member. It was not fear or respect alone. It was something heavier. Commander Rovak walked into the chamber where all teams had gathered. The air inside was tense. Faces showed no smiles, only quiet eyes that had seen things no report could fully describe. Rovak stood near the large screen and raised his voice, not with power, but with clarity. He asked for the final words from each team. What did they find? What did they feel? What did they now believe? The forest team spoke first. They said the jungle was alive, not just with creatures, but with lessons. Every step gave warning, every sound carried meaning. The trees did not just grow, they defended. The animals did not just live, they watched. They said they felt like guests in a world that had no patience for guests. The ocean team followed. They spoke of the deep where light did not reach, of creatures with no eyes but perfect aim, of large shadows that passed without notice and disappeared before the drones could react. They said the sea below was not just water. It was history and depth and endless hunger. The plains team spoke last. They told of speed and silence, of eyes that glowed at night and teeth that left no second chance. They said the open land was not open. It was a field of ambush, a place where survival came not from running but from knowing when not to move. Then came the voice of the cultural study team, the ones who had focused on humans. They said the truth was now clear. Humans were not survivors because of their tools or their weapons. They were survivors because of their choices. They adapted not with bodies but with thought. They had turned danger into learning, pain into memory, weakness into strength. One researcher stood and held up a data crystal. Inside it was a full report written in the clearest language the crew had ever used. It was titled simply Earth Class 10 Deathworld, not due to environment alone. Ravak read the first few lines aloud. Earth contains threats across all zones and scales. The creatures are skilled, the terrain is unstable, and the air and water carry invisible risks. But the greatest danger is the dominant species, the human. It learns from threat, grows from loss, and overcomes through connection. The hall remained silent as those words echoed. Not through fear, through understanding. Next day, Rovak gathered his council. They met in a quiet room surrounded by stars. The council members reviewed every file, video, and sample. They had seen many strong species across the galaxy, but none like this. Most powerful beings rose in safe worlds and brought war to others. But humans had risen from chaos and built balance with effort, not luck. One elder member said humans had tamed fire not to destroy, but to stay warm. Had built homes not to keep others out, but to stay alive. Had created medicines from poisons and tools from stones. This was not survival. This was mastery. The council voted to complete the mission early. The data was enough. The ship would leave. Within the next cycle, Earth would be marked in red on all star maps. A signal beacon would be placed in orbit. It would send a message to all travelers: do not land here. Observe from distance. Respect from afar. Before departure, Rovak walked alone into the observation deck. He looked at the spinning planet below. Clouds moved over lands filled with stories. Oceans breathed in and out. Lights blinked from human cities where life continued as usual. They did not know aliens had come. Did not know they had been studied. Yet if they had known, Rovak felt they would not fear. They would simply adapt. He pressed a small button and recorded his final log. He spoke slowly with words chosen with care. Earth is not the most advanced world, not the richest, not the brightest, but it is the most alive. Not because of its air or land, but because of its people. The humans walk through danger with open eyes. They build through loss. They learn through failure. They are not the strongest by nature. They are the strongest by will. He ended the message and closed the file. The engines of Vera lit up. The ship began its slow rise away from the planet. Behind them, Earth remained unchanged. No war, no signal, no chase. Just a world full of life that had never needed to prove anything. Its proof was in every heartbeat of every creature that called it home. As the ship moved into deep space, the warning beacon blinked into life. Its signal reached across stars. A single message repeated again and again. Planet 403, Earth hostile. To outsiders, contact, not advised. In the final chamber, where the crew gathered, Rovak looked at his people. He did not speak of fear or danger. He spoke of respect. He told them they had not visited a threat. They had visited a mirror. A world that showed what life could become when it had to fight for every breath. A world where even the smallest creature held power, and where the ones without claws had become kings. He looked once more at the map where Earth now shined red. Then he turned away. The mission was over. The warning was sent, and Earth kept turning, with humans walking strong upon it still. Learning, still surviving, still feared, the end.